Guys all set? Alright, so here's what we got going on. Today could be our last day making jug bodies. I can see if you guys need to make jugs tomorrow and put a handle on, you're still working your technique or form, that's fine. What we got going on is I want to kind of like when we were hand building, I would stay ahead of you guys a little bit with technique to show you kind of what's possible or what's coming. I'm going to make it a flask vase that has a narrow neck, kind of like a jug, but also introduces a new technique which is called faceting. Basically using the wire tool to cut flat planes into the piece that you're making, right? Throughout the week I'll give you guys various demonstrations that involve you guys' possibilities you guys could consider for faceting, various forms. And in this case it'll be kind of a review for jugs. With jugs, the main thing is, you want to lock in the body, but we're kind of developing our ability to collar. So collaring is really important. One of the things you want to consider is that I think the biggest thing to review is just making the neck of the piece. And an important thing for you guys to keep in mind is that clay, as it thins out, as you draw it up and pull the wall thinner, you have less of a chance to adjust the diameter of the neck, especially because once it gets less than about maybe a half-inch thick, it's not as malleable or resilient. It can't be formed and shaped as easily from like a wide thing to a narrow, or especially if your piece gets too wide and thin, you have a really hard time getting the clay to come back in on itself, right? So you always want to, when you draw your piece up, keep it narrow, and then also watch how thin it gets and make sure that you're doing your adjusting before it gets too thin. If that makes sense. All right, so what I do is I want to draw the clay up, keep the clay thick, and I'm leaving it thick not just because I want to cut through it, but also because I want to be able to shape it. And you'll see what I mean here in a second. So I'm leaving it surprisingly thick. The trick here is that, so like when I'm collaring, if you're going to collar, you don't want to thin it out too much, you just want to change the shape and get your height out of it. Try not to thin it. And also keep it thick evenly is the key. A lot of times when we throw, it's a lot thinner on the top half than the bottom half, and then we kind of compensate in consecutive or the following pulls. In this case, I need it all to be pretty even from the start. So coming up, leaving it pretty thick. And then I don't have to do a whole lot with the shaping of the body, and you'll see why here in a second. So let's get into that jug review. We've got this neck here, right? I want to use my 6 points right here, fingertip, thumb tip, and center finger first knuckle. And I want to get on those 6 points and kind of just draw it in. Because the clay is pretty thick, it'll do a lot of moving for me. It'd be a lot tougher if it was super thin, right? So once I draw up, I want to keep it thin, just up here on the top. Draw it up, give it a point. So I'm thinking of it kind of like a jug. I might pour a drink from it, who knows? Draw up a little more. And that's going to be basically my neck. I've come to a point right now where I kind of like a really simple neck on these, so I don't do a whole lot to embellish it. It's a slight S-curve in the profile is all I really do with this section. Very simple. So, pretty locked in there. Here's the new content for the faceting for you guys. I'm going to start off by making this thing kind of like oval. So I want to squeeze in from the side and get that base to kind of oval out. So I use my fingertips here on both sides, so it's like kind of oval at the base. And then you come in and kind of point the sides. I want to make this thing into like kind of a flattened diamond. Keeping in mind I'm going to be cutting through with a wire tool, right? So I need these to be like planes that are flat but curved following form. Coming to as close to a point or a point if possible. So that when I cut through with the wire, I'm cutting through all the clay and giving attention to the entire surface. Because the clay is so thick, it can handle this kind of stuff, right? I'm also thinking about that transition from the shoulder to the body and then cutting through this and defining it. But I want to make sure it's smooth, makes good sense. Comes to a point all the way to the top here, right?
1 second.
Sorry?
It looks like a bottle.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a bottle or a flask. I think of it as a flask. And I'll get these side points kind of tuned up a little bit. Then I usually take a look and just make sure it's still standing up straight, right? That part's complete. So I can see my plans don't really come together right here. So I'll just give that a little attention so when I cut, hopefully I can meet it all the way around. And then taking the wire, you guys just kind of pick a spot that seems right, and then hope for the best as you slice down through it. I'm going to try to capture with this whole face and not cut through the clay. There we go. One, two, and the opposite side. And to finish it off, I'll do a scallop here at the base. Pull that up with the wire tool in a second. Here's the faceted form. I'll do a little cleanup on it later, but that gives you a completely different look than you normally get with the thrown round piece. So I'll have a couple of other examples of forms you guys can use this on. But the key is, this next unit, you guys are going to have the choice of the form that you apply the technique of faceting to. So a little bit more choice. And then after that, you guys are going to have a choose your own adventure unit, and that'll wrap up our semester. We're getting pretty close. Thank you for your attention. I've got clay ready for you guys. You guys can work on jug bodies or jug handles, whichever you need to do to get the job done.